Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of the Fishing Teacher, and really appreciate you guys watching today's video and spending some time with me. Guys, today we're going to be talking about how to catch bass without using all the newfangled expensive electronic technology. I think a lot of people, they get into this frame of mind that they are behind an 8-ball somehow and they can't keep up with, the way the sport is advancing, and they're sort of left behind. But guys, you don't have to do that. You don't have to keep up. And I'm going to give you guys some tips and advice in today's video on how to sort of continue to catch lots of bass going the low-tech, low-expensive way or inexpensive way. So we're going to get into that in today's video. Also, guys, quick reminder, I know everybody's got, spring fishing on their mind. If you guys are wanting to get stocked up on your spring fish and tackle, I'd invite you to go into the description of this video and use and bookmark my Tackle Warehouse link. It's a good way to get all your tackle set up. They got everything you could possibly need. And also, guys, the channel gets a small percentage of a commission on anything you buy, so it's a good way to support the Fishing Teacher by using that link, so I really appreciate that. Okay, a lot of you guys that watch my other channel, you know my stance on forward-facing sonar, so I'm not going to get into that in today's video. The point of the video is I want to talk about how to catch fish the low-tech, inexpensive way without having to spend all that money on electronic technology. Now, the first thing that you have to realize is that every single body of water or lake, in particular, some more than others depending upon the structure of the lake, there's a couple different populations of bass. There's some bass that just like to live offshore and like to live in deeper water. Those are the fish that a lot of people target with that electronic technology. There's also a percentage of the bass population that does not go deep and does not use that open water, and they live their lives in shallow water. There's been studies out there where, one bass will live next to a lay down log in 4 foot of water and not get away from that log. They'll maybe go 100 yards away from that log, but they live right there their whole lives. So sort of give you guys some confidence to knowing that there is a population of bass to be caught in shallower water all year long. Now, the thing that you have to really get good at if you're going to compete against the high-tech people and be a low-tech angler is you have to be a lot more efficient than they are. You have to really get good at your boat positioning. You have to get good at your casting. You have to have an understanding of different type of lure categories and colors and know when to switch and all that type of stuff. You have to have an understanding of, water clarity and water levels, because all those factors influence shallow water fishing more than those offshore fish. But the main thing is you have to get good at looking at and fishing visible targets and breaking down the lake from the visual standpoint. Now, most of the time, guys, if I look back at my career, I could have probably done almost as good as I have in my career, even if I didn't have any electronics whatsoever, because much of my success has been target-oriented fishing. Now, it's nice to have a depth finder to see how deep the water is, and in reality, that's all I use the depth finder for. I could literally use just a flasher and probably do just as good in my fishing as I've, have with the electronics that I have, which is, the unit I have has 2D sonar, down imaging, and side imaging. I never use down imaging and side imaging. It's just on the unit. I always just use 2D sonar. But the point is you have to get a master at breaking down visual targets. Now, this is a little bit more difficult than what a lot of people think, because the visual targets that you have and that you fish are in relationship or in correlation with how they're positioned on the lake and the water depth nearby them. So that is where it is nice to have at least a rudimentary depth finder. You can have a little 5-inch 2D sonar just to tell you how deep it is, as far as, say, for example, you're fishing some boat docks and it's nice to know how deep the water is off the end of those docks. But the main thing that you have to do is get to be an expert at identifying the type of structures visually that bass use throughout the year. Now, a good example of that, guys, is like in colder water, when that water temperature is like under 55 degrees, the bass prefer rock or grass, or submergent grass or rock. That's why if you have under 55 degrees, rocky banks, bluffs, submergent hydrilla and milfoil, riprap banks, those are really good structures when that water temperature is over 55 degrees. As that water temperature gets over 55 degrees, you start noticing a little bit more of a trend for bass to use wood structures, boat docks, lay down trees, stumps, logs, that type of deal. And that's probably one of my favorite targets to fish when the water gets really warm in the summertime, is shallow wood targets. Another thing that you have to really get good at when you're fishing targets is to pay attention to how the shade is coming off those targets. Bass that live in shallow water are very shade dependent unless the water is really muddy, and the places that you catch bass will change throughout the course of the day based upon the angle of the sun and the light intensity, whether it's bright and sunny or that type of stuff. So one of the good things that you have to do once you identify, those key structures, really focus on the shade. It's like if you can find shade anytime the water temperature is over 50 degrees, it's always better. Those rocky banks that have some shade thrown off of them, if you're fishing a boat dock, fishing it underneath the shady part of the dock, if there's a tree in the water, there's always a little part that's getting blocked by or has some shade thrown off on it. But really try to focus on the shade as much as possible. Another thing is when you're targeting shallow water structures, whatever that shallow water structure is, you have to be methodical, and you can't slop through an area, because shallow water bass in general are more spooky than deeper water offshore bass. So it requires a little bit of a different approach. So be quiet with your trolling motor, be quiet with your in the boat movements. Don't talk a lot. Try to pretend like you're hunting for bass, because that's basically what fishing is you're hunting for fish. And when you're in that shallow water, those bass are a lot more susceptible to being spooked and made non-aggressive by a lot of different noises in the water. If you do have an electronic unit and you're fishing visible targets a lot of times and you don't need to know how deep the water is, turn your electronics off. That's even going to help you a little bit more. And don't ever underestimate the importance of being an accurate caster. That is the difference between somebody that catches a lot of good fish out of shallow water and somebody that struggles, is being able to put that bait where you want it. And one of the things that I can recommend, guys, and a lot of people, it just goes in one ear and out the other because it's something that's not flashy and they think they don't really have to do it, is really practice on your casting. Because if you're fishing a shallow water target, I don't care what it is, just a matter of an inch or two can make a big difference in if you're going to get a bite or not. You have to be able to put that bait right where you want it. So don't underestimate the importance of just practicing your casting and try to get better as a caster. We can all do it. I mean, everybody, I don't care how old you are, how long you've been fishing, you can always improve your casting just by spending more time with it. Another thing you have to do is, when you're fishing and focusing on those shallow fish, you have to incorporate knowledge of bass movement, bass seasonal patterns, and their moods and personalities. Now, this is one thing that all the spotlighters and live scopers don't have to mess with, because those fish don't live in the same, world as the shallow water fish. But you really have to try to educate yourself on seasonal patterns and how these fish move based upon different times of the year. That will give you a big indication on where you need to start your search at, as far as what part of the lake, the best water clarities, best water levels. Water clarity and water levels, another big thing, guys. The way, if the water falls or rises, it has a lot more of an impact on those shallow fish than it does those offshore fish. Doesn't have any impact on those fish that are out in the middle of the lake. It doesn't matter if the lake's 20 foot high or 20 foot low, but just a drop of a foot or two in most lakes across the country can really affect the positioning and how the fish bite or don't bite in shallow water. So that water level and the water clarity changes is really important. You're going to have to get an understanding and master the science and the art of how bass bite and react to different lures based upon water clarity changes. In addition to the water clarity changes, all that stuff's tied in. The water clarity change is tied into your water level, it's tied into your water temperature, it's tied into the type of structure that you have. And that's why I always say that shallow water fishing is the most difficult. It requires more intelligence and being more of a specialist and becoming more of an art than offshore fishing, guys. Offshore fishing is like being in kindergarten compared to shallow water fishing. Shallow water fishing is like being in college. Offshore fishing is like being in first grade or kindergarten. I've done it both. I know what I'm talking about on this. But the main thing is just make that commitment. It's like if you don't want to fish with the new electronic technology, don't. Just focus 100% of your time on shallow water. There's enough fish in shallow water for you to be successful at it, but it requires a different approach, and that approach takes time. It takes time to learn about the bass, and that's one of the things in today's angler society is most people don't have patience. They don't want to put in the work. They want the easy way, the quick way, which comes with the electronic technology. But in the big picture, guys, shallow water fishing is so much more satisfying. It's more fun. It's just more of what bass fishing is. It's more, the techniques itself are more exciting. So like I said, don't feel like you have to keep up with the race on that, because you don't. You can do just as good without it. So I hope it helps you guys out. We'll talk later.